When the revolution happened in my country, I was 5 years, and it means that I didn't understand what does it mean actually. Of course, many members around me from my family was very involved with the revolution issue, not just revolution issue and something that happened after the revolution. But my family, my parents and my sisters, we lived in a village far from the big cities and in a very silent garden, orange garden and kiwi garden. And my parents tried to keep us far from the political conflicts because many people around us were very involved with the problems. For example, in one of family around us, people inside the family, within the family, were against each other. Somebody, for example, sentenced to death penalty by their family members. Somebody killed the others. That was a huge problem for, I think, for many Iranian families. And my parents tried and preferred to keep us far from these conflicts. Therefore, I didn't know many problems. I heard about them, of course. I thought that they were my family, but I didn't know about the details. I didn't know about the whole issue. I grew up in this situation until I left my family. I began study journalism in Tehran, and gradually I knew about something that happened in 10 years, 15 years behind me. Yes, it was of course some books, but in that situation that I explained, the only thing that we did, I and my sisters, were just reading books, especially in the summers and in the vacations, because there was not a lot of TV programs for children in that time after the revolution and during the war. You know that we had 8 years war with our neighbors, unfortunately, with Iraq. And reading the stories was the only thing we did. But one day I was younger, I was older than that, I was not child. But one day I found a book in our library that I didn't see before that, because that was for Vuxen, for adults. And I just start to read it. That was a book, but that was a magazine, like a book. The presentation was a book. That was a student magazine of Gilan. Gilan is an area in north of Iran. Gilan University. And I knew that my cousin borrowed it from the university before the revolution and brought it to my parents' home, maybe for reading, and I just lost it there. And my cousin was killed after revolution. And this book had very beautiful poems and articles, of course, from the West, ideas, West side, but left side, sorry. I mix Norwegian and English. And very beautiful poems. Once I used one of that poetry in my essay at the school, And my teacher after the class called me and told me, please don't use this again. This is too dangerous. I didn't know, I had no idea about that. I just thought that this is very beautiful poem. But I knew that the poet was very known. Gradually I knew that the poet was very known and the poem was very known, and everything, everybody knew that this poem and poet belong to which side.
Right.
Yes, but I kept that book for a while until I left my country, and I love the poems inside that book. And I remember the name was Baran. Baran means the rain. I lost my job. I left the newspaper I worked with because I wanted to write everything I wanted. And after the newspaper, I started to write and publish them in my blog, and they blocked my blog. And I sent my written to some websites because with the surname, because I wanted to publish it. I'm here not just because I needed to write. Honestly, I'm here because I wanted to protect my child, my daughter. As a human rights activist, you have to think about your children. When you cannot protect them, you cannot protect nobody else. This is who I am. I don't know what can I say, but this is who I am. I can't, I have no much tolerance to accept everything around me. I prefer to select myself. And if I can't, I should find another way. This is a very difficult question. You know, my written had two parts. One side was literature, and one side was journalistic text. In the journalistic written, something I did was about, maybe the most important thing was investigation journalism in Iran. That is not very popular because it's too difficult. Maybe you know that I followed up some cases in prison, women who were sentenced to execution and stoning. And in 2 years, I followed up these cases, one by one, city by city, prison by prison, lawyer by lawyer, and we made a very big network to find them, to help them, to promote their situation for the others. I mean, about the law, equality, and many things else. Punishment, violence, and that was my job as a journalist. Of course, when I left my country, the issue changed, and if I wanted to be an activist, I had to find another issue. I will return to this. The other side is literature. Literature needs inspiration, and inspiration comes from your life, nature, family, friendship, everything. Literature is literature. But about the activism and journalism, I should say yes. Now, one day, maybe I should not be very honest, but I'm an honest person. One day I got a comment from a friend. He wrote that who are you? Are you an activist in Norway? Because somebody, a Canadian website interviewed me about my activism. And he asked in the comment that, who are you? Are you an activist in Norway? You work with women in prison in Iran? Honestly, I had no answer for him. I said, no, I'm not. I'm an activist here for freedom of expression. I work with Norwegian pen. I try to find another way for something I love. But something is inside my thought, in my mind. How can I do with that? I'm not an activist, but I write about my activism. I cannot cut my past. Everybody has a past and has a future and a present. I cannot ignore my past as the same that I cannot think or ignore my future or my present. I researched my master thesis at the university in Trondheim was about activism, feminism in Iran. And now I'm an activist for freedom of expression. This can be one thing in one category and can be separate. You know, let me tell that I don't like this word. Actually, I hate the word exile because I present myself, I introduce myself by my work and my identity. My identity doesn't come from where I live in. I left my home and I made another home. My home is where I live in. My home is where I love in. And my home is where I have a family, friendship, and somebody that I love them. This is enough for me. I'm not an exiled writer. I don't like to present and introduce myself as an exiled person because this is a mark. This is a mark, because when you tell me you are an exiled writer, it means that somebody else, somebody writers, somebody poet are here, that this is home belong them. I don't believe this. The earth now, with this technology, with the internet, the websites, our world is too small that we can keep an area and telling that this is mine and everybody else are else. I don't believe it. Let me back to your question. What did you ask? The most important meaning was that somebody who leave their home. They live far from their home. I was in Iran and I worked with the US, in Africa, in Norway. I wrote for a magazine in Norway, in Paris, and some. I think the borders have not meaning like before. Why we should present and introduce ourselves with borders? It means that human being is not the main that I introduce myself with. My daughter didn't know many things about our situation in Iran because my husband and I believe that my work and my activity is too dark and too dangerous, and she needs her childhood with happiness and hope and everything a child needs. Therefore, many times, and I travel too much. Many times that I traveled, my sister and my mother kept her, and they loved her. They love her, and she was very happy with them more than me, because everything was for her. And when we left the country, she thought that, because before leaving the home, I was in the US, I was in New York for a speech in UN that was about stoning in Iran. Mm-hmm. And when I returned to Iran, I promised her to bring her to the next traveling. And she didn't know that we will leave the home. And another thing was that she didn't like school in Iran. She didn't like hijab. She hated hijab. And she didn't want to go to school because her school was maybe too much religious. And when we left the country, the first thing she asked me was, can we stay here? And I said, no, you have to go to school, we should return. But something else happened. I knew that I cannot return, unfortunately. I had my return ticket. And of course, I told the ambassador of Sweden that maybe I cannot return. When I was sure, I applied for ICORN, and I became a guest writer. It was very easy to her to accept her, because maybe she knew that when we returned, she had to begin at school. And she loved the school in Trondheim. She loved it, and we were very happy. She didn't know many things about my work until last year, when New Yorker interviewed me, and she read it, and she surprised, and she cried so much. And she told me that you had to tell me. I knew about us at the same time with the people. That was my right. And I said that we prefer to keep you far from these problems, these issues. That's a little unbelievable for many of our friends, but it was true. You know, we started to talk about the borders, because I'm here as an exiled writer. This is the border. Mm. This is the wall. And I said that I was very lucky that I have very good friends, Norwegian friends and international friends in Trondheim. They helped me so much, I think. 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I didn't think such this. After 3 years living in Norway, I lived in Norway, and mentally, I was in Iran. But gradually, maybe because of my daughter, one day I look at her, and I look at myself, and I understood that I cannot understand her, because he knows. It's very difficult language. And I live in a city that the pronunciation is, the dialect pronunciation is too much difficult. And I told to myself that I have to fight. This is my new struggle. I have to. After 20 years, high school, I returned to high school. Here, the Norwegian say videregående, the high school. I returned to high school began with Norwegian language, because the courses, the Norwegian course was not enough for me. I needed more. 1 year, I just close all social media, all relation with the media, the Persian written. I didn't write anything. I just focused on the Norwegian language and Norwegian literature. I learned it, I passed it, and I began at the university in master, and many things changed because I needed it. If I wanted to be a writer, a poet in Norway, I had to fight with this new order. No, this is too much difficult, but always I prefer to recommend a poetry book, and now I propose Lurka. I wanted to say Ahmad Shamlu or Furugh Farrokhzad. Yes, Furugh Farrokhzad, but I think maybe many people don't know them, but they can know, they can find them. Furugh's book is in English, in Norwegian, yes, and I think in many languages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recommend Furugh.